So the name Nehemiah means God comforts. And I think that an important question that we should be asking as we read Nehemiah is, to whom does God give comfort? Interestingly enough, Nehemiah in the beginning is the cupbearer for the Persian emperor. And what that means is that Nehemiah is to give companionship to the emperor, to give conversation to the emperor, to be the emperor's friend, and also to test the emperor's food and drink before the emperor eats it, in case it's been poisoned by someone. So here we see that God, through Nehemiah, God comforts. God is comforting the Persian emperor. And here we see that God is not only about comforting God's chosen people, but the whole world, even Persian emperors. This is what God is about. As the story goes along, we see that Nehemiah asks the emperor if he can go back to Jerusalem and help with the rebuilding project. Nehemiah is in charge of rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, whereas Ezra was in charge of rebuilding the temple. Well, the emperor says, yes, you may go. And here God is working through the emperor to provide comfort for these ancient Jews. So Nehemiah goes back and starts this rebuilding project. Well, as the story goes along, we end up seeing that there's conflict both within this new community in Jerusalem, and also conflict that comes from outside. Outside of the community, there are people who would rather Jerusalem not be rebuilt. And these are people who end up accusing Nehemiah and Ezra of starting a rebellion against the emperor. So Nehemiah and Ezra have to affirm their innocence in all of this and say that they're not out to start a rebellion, they just want to start their own community. And from within their community, there are people who disagree with Ezra and Nehemiah as to how to go about rebuilding the temple and the city. So there's this tension, there's this conflict that's happening. And what happens when there's conflict within a community? Well, that conflict needs an outlet. And what often ends up happening is you find a scapegoat. So mimetic theory calls this the sacrificial mechanism, the scapegoat mechanism. You end up blaming and projecting all of the problems within the community unconsciously onto a minority group, or a group that is probably not going to be able to fight back very well. And you see this unconscious mechanism happening in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, where they end up blaming the foreigners in their midst, the aliens in their midst, for being a threat to their religious, cultural, and national identity. In the same way that Solomon married foreign wives and they became a threat to his religious identity, these foreign women amongst Ezra, Nehemiah, and this community are going to be a threat to their identity. So Nehemiah and Ezra say we must get rid of them. This is the sacrificial scapegoat mechanism. Now, before we get too harsh on Ezra and Nehemiah, I think it's worth asking ourselves, where in our lives are we infected with the same scapegoat mechanism? Before we get this idea that what Ezra and Nehemiah do here is biblical precedent for kicking the aliens or illegal immigrants out of our country, I think it's also important to see that there's a tension in the Bible. That not all of the Bible supports this act. So you get this in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 33. When an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as a citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And here we see Nehemiah, that God comforts. This is what Nehemiah, the name, is trying to get at. God comforts not just God's chosen people, but seeks to comfort the whole world, including the aliens, the illegal immigrants within our midst. They are to be to you as your own people, because God wants to comfort everyone. And God does that through us, and also through people like the Persian emperor. God works through human beings to comfort one another. That's what I think Nehemiah is challenging us to do, also challenging us to see the ways in which we actually provide no comfort, or the ways in which we provide harm to our fellow human beings, and challenge us to be a comfort for one another. So those are my thoughts on Nehemiah. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks.